Okay, those of us in the room, we are going to get started today. The QR code sign-in is getting worked on, so give it a few minutes and then try the sign-on again. For those of you I haven't had the opportunity to meet, I am Kate Bradshaw, serving as president of the league this year and filling in for my colleague Krista Hinton, council member from Santa Clara, who is our first vice president and will be chairing our LPC meetings for this year. She will be with us each Monday during the legislative session, but wasn't able to come up for this first session kickoff meeting. So I'm filling in and she is online. First things first, how many of you, is this your first LPC meeting? And if you're on the online Zoom, if you'll put your city and raise your hand in the chat if this is your first LPC meeting. So for those in the room, okay, we got a couple LPC newbies. Welcome to what I think is the best subcommittee of all the subcommittees at the league. So we will be doing this exercise each week now from the legislative session. The first week, it's combined with Local Officials Day, but we will be gathering as a group and bonding deeply for the next several weeks. First things first, we do need to adopt the minutes from our November 17th LPC meeting. That was our last meeting in 2025 for which we have minutes. Can I get a motion to adopt our minutes? Oh, Dan Dugan, thank you. Thank you. So we got a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. If you're in the chat, you can give us a thumbs up. Looks like we have, any opposed? Seeing none, we are unanimously approved with our minutes. All right. Cassidy still working on the sign-in? Still working on the sign-in. Okay. Next, we're going to turn some time over to Molly Wheeler, who is our Deputy Director, who is going to talk about Local Officials Day. Hopefully you are all signed up and ready. Apparently you have to hold this and talk into the mic. Enjoy.
Beautiful. Just what I was hoping for. All right, and do we have it?
Oh, go back.
There we go. Wait.
Go back.
Oh.
Up here, that's great.
There you go.
Wait, but...
Yeah, you can go down.
There's these, but also... There's these. So, elected officials essentials for our newly electeds. We have two more, and anyone else that wants to join in. So tomorrow we'll be doing the Legislative 101 with Justin. If you're a newly elected official at LPC today and feeling like what is going on, grab one of us after and we're happy to chat with you, but also come to Justin's webinar tomorrow to kind of help walk through how everything's going to work. We're also doing a webinar this Friday for our small LAA communities. If you are not an LAA community, we invite you to find another way to spend your time that day. But if you are an LAA community, we would love it if you could join us. And then we had a great training last week with Carrie Nakamura on budget and finance. We have a lot more to dig into, so we will be scheduling a follow-up to that. Local Officials Day is next Wednesday for most of our electeds, the Salt Palace. If you're bringing your youth council, that programming starts in the morning at the Capitol. If you're an elected official, you're welcome to come to the Capitol in the morning, but we will not have any programming set out for you. So if you want to hang out with your youth council, go meet with your legislators, explore the Capitol complex, hang out with league staff, you're welcome to. But just know that we aren't going to have any programming or things for you to do at the Capitol. All of your stuff will start at the Salt Palace at 10. National League of Cities, we just wanted to flag this for you. This will be March 16th through 18th in Washington, D.C. We know we have a few cities who like going to that. If you're planning on going, let us know. If you've gone in the past and are thinking you're not going to go or send fewer people or more people or anything like that, just let us know. We usually send league staff and a number that can kind of handle the delegation from Utah. So it's helpful for us to know just so we know how many people to send along. And then finally, we have our ULCT mid-year conference, April 22nd through 24th in St. George. I got a question about the room block and booking hotels for mid-year. We haven't quite opened registration yet. That'll be in a couple weeks. Once we open registration, the room block will open with that as well. So any questions about our upcoming events? Awesome.
Hey, thank you, Molly.
For anyone that's new, people that don't know me, my name is Justin Lee. I am the Deputy Director here. I oversee the legislative stuff that we do, the advocacy. So you hear a lot from me for the next 8 weeks, and then I disappear and Molly takes over all the engagement. But a lot going on. We want to talk about a couple of things. One, a little bit of Legislative 101, logistics for upcoming LPC, but also a little bit of the political outlook for what's coming up. So, as I'm sure most of you know, declarations of candidacy for everyone that's not running for Congress happened. That's a whole different thing. But for everyone not running for Congress, declarations of candidacy happened at the first of this month. There are legislators who are retiring. In the Senate, we have Ann Milner, Jerry Stevenson, and Nate Bluin, who did not declare, who will not be running. And then we have I'm not going to read them all, a handful, more than a handful, of representatives who are also not going to be running this year. Just to make you aware of that, they are still legislators for the next 8 weeks and through the rest of this year. So don't stop talking to them, but they will also have people running for their spots. We don't have the whole list of everybody running. That's a much longer list. But it is campaign season for everybody else. All the other legislators have declared they are running again. There's a lot out there, and they've got their issues up on their websites. We'll talk about more of these later. We have a big chunk of our schedule today dedicated to talking about taxes. But as you can see, truth in taxation, fair taxes, fiscal responsibility, local government, government transparency, lower taxes, sunsetting property taxes on seniors for fixed incomes. Taxes are one of the big things that they are talking about. So why are we talking about this today, other than the fact that it's an issue that's out there? Legislators often come to you as elected officials and others looking for endorsements. Here's my advice to you. Do not give your endorsement away too easily. When they come and ask for endorsements, feel free to ask them, what are you going to do to help my city? Where are you at on these different policy issues that matter to me? So sometimes people want your policy endorsement and they'll give it back to you when you're running again. But I would just suggest perhaps take a moment and have a conversation with them about where their policy priorities are and how those line up with your policy priorities and things that you care about. Maybe take a moment to educate them on some of the things happening in your city. Again, just do not give that endorsement away too lightly. There's plenty of election time left this year and plenty of time for conversations. With that, we're going to talk about the legislative priorities that have come out recently. So this is a great slide. Cassidy made it so much better than I had it. But the Senate put out their priorities. Senate's priorities, I will say, this is my little editorializing on their priorities. Senate priorities did not tell us necessarily a lot about where they're going. They have some high-level statements. They tell us some of the things they're concerned about. It's everything you'd expect them to be concerned about. It's all the regular things that are out there. But building the future grid, talking about energy powers our homes, talking about the next industrial revolution starting with the grid, talking about we don't reinterpret but we enhold the Constitution. There's certainly be constitutional discussions going around. We know there will be some constitutional amendments proposed that deal with legislative initiative powers at both the local and the state level. Data privacy is something that's been talked about the last couple of years, more discussions around that. Lots of discussions about water and water infrastructure, conservation, and election integrity. Those are several things that we see coming out of the Senate. But again, the Senate, they keep their cards a little closer to the vest. They don't necessarily show us their hand as much. The House, however, likes to be a little bit more explicit in what they're thinking. This is from the House priorities. Reining in property tax is the title of one of their sections. Not discussing property tax, reining in property tax. It says there, we'll take steps to reduce property taxes for Utah homeowners and ensure taxpayers can make their voices heard on local property tax issues. The House has showed us a little bit more about what they're going to talk about, and we will talk about what some of those proposals are, but it's not, again, just discussing property tax. The House has said reining in property tax. Keeping home ownership within reach. Again, these are all House priorities. Legislature, and this is interesting, the legislature will help cities invest in the infrastructure needed to bring new homes onto the market at prices Utahns can afford. So a discussion here around infrastructure, not necessarily around preemption, which is a good thing for us. It really is focused on the infrastructure. If you look on the right-hand side here, this is a graphic, and we're pretty happy about this. You may not be able to read that fine print at the bottom, but we'll get there. 95% of building inspections are now completed within 1 business day, thanks to HB 58. That's 3 times faster than the required standard. And the source there at the bottom, Utah League of Cities and Towns. So yes, the League of Cities and Towns made it into the House priorities as a thing that we are doing well. So well done, everyone there. But no, and that is actually a nice thing. We've been pushing these data points for a long time. Carson has done a lot of work collecting this, and it made it all the way to the House priorities. So again, the messages that we are sharing are getting up there into the 3rd floor. A few more things, cutting government spending. This is an interesting one, and I want you all to take note. We are challenging all levels of government, city, county, school districts, and even ourselves, to take a hard look at their budget and cut anything that isn't benefiting Utahns. Don't know what that's going to look like from a legislative perspective, or if that's just a challenge that's out there, but you want to make sure you flag that. Restoring our representative democracy. Again, I'm going to read the bottom part. This year, Utah voters will have the chance to approve a constitutional amendment that restores the balance our founders intended. It reaffirms that Utah's laws should be shaped and updated by the elected representatives who are accountable to Utahns, not locked in place by outside interest or unelected judges. There is going to be a lot of discussions with the judiciary this year. My prayers and thoughts go out to the judiciary this year. But also, if you remember from a year and a half ago, there was discussions around Amendment D, and that was the one that would have put the constitutional amendment on dealing with initiative authority. That amendment ultimately did not go onto the ballot a year and a half ago, but it will certainly be coming back. The reason we flagged this as well this year is that is an amendment that we didn't take a position on because a ballot proposition is not something we can take a position on. The 2811-1203 PAPIA says we can't use public resources for political purposes. Once something is on the ballot, that falls into that definition of political purposes. So Amendment D was not something we ultimately took positions on. We had a lot of discussions around that, if you remember, but didn't have to really deal with it. This year, there will be legislation around that, and we can take a position on legislation. So there will certainly be political discussions that come up around what initiative authority looks like and how that impacts us and the state. So be prepared for that one. And then addressing homelessness. We will continue working with cities, counties, and the Homeless Services Board to streamline our homeless services system, focus resources on programs that deliver results, and help people get the treatment they need to turn their lives around. Again, not telling us exactly what that's going to look like, but gives us a little idea of where they're going. And then tackling aging infrastructure and insufficient supply. This is talking about water. The legislature is taking the same long-term approach to water as it does for roads, investing in reliable infrastructure, expanding storage, and maintaining the systems that will keep the taps running for generations to come. If you remember from a couple years ago, and then we talked about this over the interim, but HB 280 did the study that would implement a water fee that would then create a water infrastructure fund that would then grant out for the infrastructure. We have concerns with the water fee for multiple different reasons. One, many of you would be the ones implementing that fee, but then passing the money back to the state. Two, the water would not necessarily, or the funds would not necessarily come back to your municipality. They would be used potentially statewide. So we have some concerns with this fee. One of the pieces of homework we gave you back in November was to let your legislators know what a water fee might do to your citizens and the cost of living. And so I'm just going to reiterate that one again. If you're having discussions with legislators, ask them what they're doing with water infrastructure and fees, and if they know what that will do to you. There's plenty of articles around this. One of the overarching themes coming from the House in particular is cost of living. They're concerned about property taxes, gas taxes, other things. From a cost of living perspective, it's probably a worthwhile question to ask them, how does increasing water fees fit into that cost of living paradigm that you have? So giving you a few things to talk about. So those are the priorities that we're seeing out of the House and the Senate. We will be getting and are getting plenty of bills that are now out there, so we're not just talking about amorphous concepts, but talking about actual hard bills. When we're at the LPC, that's where we take our positions on bills. So we're going to talk about session logistics a little bit and what that looks like for anyone new or for anyone that needs the reminder. So one, LPC, that's this meeting. We will be holding this meeting Basically, every Monday, once the session gets going, exception for the week of President's Day, legislature doesn't meet on Monday, we don't meet that Monday. So the week of 2/16, February 16th for President's Day, we'll be meeting on Tuesday, but otherwise we will be having LPC every Monday during the session. If you're in person, that's room 210 of the Senate building. You can also join us online like you're doing right now for those of you who are online. Legislative Policy Committee bill tracking positions. So this is where we take our positions on bills. We update some of those positions throughout the week, but where we ultimately adopt that is during LPC, and we'll be doing that at the end of this meeting. So let's talk about what those positions are that we can take. And we as league staff are as culpable as anyone when it comes to making up nuanced positions that don't really exist in our bylaws. So these are our real positions. These are what we can actually take by our bylaws. Support. It's a good bill. We like that bill. Oppose. We don't like that bill. Sometimes this is the one where we make a motion to hate. That would be an opposition. But officially, we can only have a position of oppose. There is no position of hate. You can feel that in your heart, but it doesn't go on the bill tracker. Neutral. Neutral is one, and we've changed the way we use this a little bit the last couple of years. And part of that is because of monitor, which we'll get to in a second. Neutral, we usually use for bills that we negotiate on. So we don't usually start out neutral. Usually there's something that will be a position pending, or we oppose a bill, and we negotiate it to a place where we're now neutral on it. We got rid of the stuff that we really hated, and so now we can be neutral on it. But we don't usually default to a neutral position. Monitor, those are the bills that we just sort of are watching. We track somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 to 250 bills every session. There's about 50 to 70 of those that we really care about, and a lot of them that are just sort of situational awareness. We use Monitor for that situational awareness. It's on our tracker. We're watching it just to see if anything interesting happens with it. We just may need to be aware of it later for tracking, but we're just monitoring it. So Monitor is we're just sort of watching it. Neutral means we are truly neutral on this, and we usually negotiate it to that position. No position happens very infrequently. We only had one no position bill last year, and that is when we do not reach a consensus at LPC. So in order to take the position on the bill, we need a 60% vote of those that are present. A no position means we don't get that 60% threshold. Does anyone know what we took a no position on last year? It was the fluoride bill. We did not have a consensus on the fluoride bill among our membership, so we were at no position. And then position pending is where the vast majority of our bills are going to be early in the session. That means we haven't taken a position yet. We're either still reviewing the bill, we're still trying to figure out where that's going, or we're in heavy enough negotiations that we're just not taking a position yet. Sometimes we'll take a position right out of the gate of oppose, and that helps us in a negotiation. The legislator wants to get us off to oppose and maybe get us to neutral. Other times, that doesn't help us, so we just go at position pending. Those are our official positions. If you are curious where we're at on a position on a bill, you can always reach out to staff, or if you would like to change one of our positions on a bill, when we get to the ratification of the bill tracker, or as we're discussing a bill here, you can make a motion that we change a position on our bill, but these are the actual positions we can take. Everything else is a little superfluous. The last note I'll make on bill positions is there may be political reasons we take a position on the bill that doesn't necessarily match how strongly we feel about the policy. So we may not actually care that much about a bill, but boy, we need a legislator's help on something, so we're going to support his bill or her bill. So there may be political reasons why we take a position on a bill that have little to do with the policy, but unfortunately we're in a political realm, so that comes into play. But again, if you have questions about why we're taking positions on any bill, always reach out to us. This is never a secret thing. We're always going to be open, particularly at the LPC as we're talking about that. We're going to show you these. This is a quick primer on how to read these. So we'll show several of these today, but draft legislation will have the number of the bill, the name of the bill sponsor, and a QR code that you can scan it and look at that bill while we're sitting there. But the staff recommendation will be there at the bottom. While we're discussing that, that's where you can change it. Again, position pending is a real thing. Negotiating towards support is not a real position, but we may have information there. We may say oppose and then parentheses motion to hate. That could be there, depending on where we're at in the bill. But again, official positions. And then mostly it's just because we think we're funny. But useful information about key provisions of the legislation, less useful information, but we're being thorough. And then finally, we will have extremely niche part of the legislation that we don't care that much about, but we know the attorneys are going to ask about, so we're putting it in small font down at the bottom. And those are the parts that Cassidy hates that we edit when she's not in the room, because she tries to make our slides look better. Finally, if you're coming in person, this is a map of the Capitol. That purple square there, that is the Senate building. Hopefully, as they're finishing up the state office building, we will have more parking, and you can park closer than a mile away. Although if you need to get your steps in, on the hills, Capitol's a great place for it this time of year. So we're in that east building, though. We're not in the Capitol building itself. And then finally, when you're in the building, we are upstairs on the second floor in room 210. Those are the logistics. Any questions about what LPC looks like going forward? Yeah, Mike.
The March 9th recap meeting, is that back here then and not there?
Oh, great question. So March, we call it Week 8 LPC. So after the legislative session, there will be an LPC. I don't know that, I think last year we did it on Thursday. I don't know that we're going to do it on Monday. Unless we already set that somewhere and I forgot. But we will have one. No, the online one the week after session will be fully online. We will not make you go anywhere the week after session for Week 8.
And then also, is the sign-in working for today?
It is. Alexa tells me the sign-in is now working for today. We only need you to sign in if we're taking a vote. We will be ratifying the bill tracker at the end. So if you don't get signed in, not end of the world, but it should be working now. And the other defining piece of LPC is Slido questions. So with that, we're going to turn it over to our Slido master, Carson.
I don't know how I feel about that title. So really quick, I'm going to refresh this. So for those of you who are returning, you are all very familiar with Slido. Oh no, what's happening there? For those of you who are returning, you're already very familiar with Slido, but I see some new faces in the room, and I know we have some new faces online. So I want to take a second to explain why we do it. Before I jump in there, I'll leave the link up there. Perfect. That was an indirect way of getting to that, but you have it. Again, not critical, but we'll use the sign-in for taking official votes. We're a public body. We have to keep some records, some documentation. Every member of the league gets 3 votes plus a board seat if you have a board member on the LPC. We do occasionally have some contentious votes, so it's critical that we're able to make sure that the correct people are voting, that we're tracking the correct votes, and that sign-in helps us do that tally. Like Justin said, it's not critical today. I'm not expecting a controversial vote on the bill tracker, but just to familiarize you all with the process. Has everybody had a chance? I see phones going down. Awesome. Let's see, then going back to... Okay, so Slido, for those of you who are new, you can scan that QR code with your phone. It'll ask you to put your name in. The reason we do that is sometimes we do ask policy questions or ask for data. That helps us make sure that we're getting opinions from LPC members. The LPC is a public body, and we do have members of the public attending. We care about your feedback more than we care about feedback from members of the public on our process and on our issues, so that helps us validate it. Number 2, we use that data to be able to try to determine if there's specific issues that maybe one city cares a lot about, or maybe large cities, or maybe small towns. That helps us find those trends and then follow up with those cities to get get more information. So that's why we collect your name. That's how we use your name. You can put your city name if that's preferable, but that's why we do it. So a little bit of context here. I see, and you don't have to be a voting member to fill this out. The Slido is not an official vote. It's an informal poll. So sometimes we'll collect just kind of random data on there. Sometimes we'll try to get your sentiment, but you're all welcome to fill this out. The background here is every year, at least the last 6 or 7 years, we've tried to have a theme for the nightly emails. We send, as it makes sense, we send out an email every night with the day's updates. There's a lot of them, so we try to keep it a little bit more interesting by having kind of some fun theme. Last year was the Oregon Trail. We've done Olympics. We've had Sometimes they're chronological, sometimes they're just fun factoids, sometimes it's just whatever Justin can come up with on the fly at 9 o'clock at night. But this year we thought it'd be fun to have to have you all get a chance to weigh in on what you think that theme should be. So we have some things here related to U.S. history because of America 250. We also thought we'd throw in some fun ones. I am personally thrilled that the Lord of the Rings is winning, so we'll have some fun there. No. Either way, we'll make sure the email has some kind of fun theme, and I look forward to getting some nerdy details into that. So we'll keep this open for just a minute longer, but are there any questions about Slido or how that's used? Oh. It's okay, we can have some really nerdy details about U.S. history too.
The only thing I'll note is this is advisory and not binding, so we appreciate your thoughts, but we'll decide where we go.
Be a fun crossover.
Does it stay up if we go?
Sometimes. We can probably move on.
All right, we'll move on. All right. Messages for legislators. So last thing, and then we'll move into our very lengthy discussion around property tax. If you were here in November, you remember we asked you to do some homework. This is a little bit of a reminder of that. So one, we asked you to explain how property tax works and impacts your city to legislators. Show what your city is doing on housing and land use. And then we're also looking for restoration of the funding for local administrative advisor. Show of hands, who has had discussions with your legislators around one or any of these topics? All right, good show of hands. Well done. Gold star for everyone. I know several of you are meeting with legislators because we're coming to some of them this upcoming week. So I encourage you to continue speaking with legislators about these issues. These are big ones that are going to be up. Property tax and housing and land use is going to be the next hour of our lives. And probably the next 8 weeks as well. But a lot to talk about there. But again, please reach out to us if you have any questions about how session works, the logistics, where we're at with different positions on different bills. And with that, Roger and Cam, we'll give it over to you for Rev and Tax. Godspeed.
Thanks. Okay. Let's slide you a little closer. Hey, greetings, everyone. Happy New Year. And here we go. Legislative session starts next week. And as Justin indicated, there's a lot of attention on property tax. Now, as you recall, a couple months ago, Roger and I stood up here at the podium, and we spent a good 45 minutes walking through the history of truth and taxation and how we got to this point. We are not repeating that today. So for those of you who were not here a couple months ago, that is available on our website. Let us know. We can send you a link to it as well. Instead, our objective today is to let you know where we are as of now, and we've got some staff recommendations on some of the bills because the bills are out in public. There are other bills that are not yet out. And as a league, we only take positions on bills that are actually out. We're going to use Slido today. We went back through our Slido results from October LPC and then the City Management Conference in November. So the Slido questions we'll be asking today are going to be building off of those Slido results and acknowledging that there are a lot of people who are new to LPC in January that weren't here in October and November when we did that. So then we can combine all those comments going forward. So keep that in mind here as we dive deeper into the property tax piece. So first, part of what is driving the discussion around property tax at the Capitol is this audit. We've linked to it in Friday Facts several times over the last couple of months, but this came from the legislative auditor looking at all things property tax. We've screenshotted a few key pieces for today's conversation, but it's an 85-page document, so we're not going to go through all 85 pages. So a couple of quick findings. Here is this finding 1.2, concerns about truth and taxation implementation. This finding 1.2 with the recommendation about virtual participation, this came as a result of a lot of the feedback we provided after the truth and taxation shortcomings over the summer when we had taxing entities that went through truth and taxation and that did not get their tax rate certified because of failure to comply with X, Y, or Z. And so we are still cautiously optimistic that we can address some of those points that you raised with us with some of the bills that are coming. A couple other key takeaways from the audit: that the truth in taxation timeline poses unique challenges for fiscal year tax entities. This is one we surveyed you as well. And in an ideal world, we would not be doing the truth in taxation hearing in August. Once the budget year has already started, you'd be doing it earlier. It's logistically impossible to change that in light of the requirements on the tax commission, county auditors, and the like. Because, Roger, we've had probably 4 meetings now where we've had those conversations with legislators.
It just cannot be done. Bear in mind, every taxing entity in the state, every government in the state, except counties and a tiny handful of special districts, operates on a fiscal year. So we're not alone on this telescope time period. The vast majority of governmental entities are, including the state.
Yep, so that was the primary focus for us in the first few meetings in October, November, was if there was a way to fix that issue. And truly the only way to fix that issue is if we went to a calendar year like the counties do, but that brings with it a whole slew of other problems and impossibilities, okay? Then part of the audit talked about the lack of an inflationary component in property tax. So this is something that we bring up in every meeting. There is not appetite at the Capitol to address an automatic inflationary type component in property tax, but it's not for lack of trying. We bring it up in basically every meeting, but again, there's not much appetite for that.
I think I want to emphasize something. That situation is not an oversight. Truth in taxation was designed around the premise that inflation was to be taken out of the property tax system. So that's why it's a more organic discussion than you realize. That goes to the essence of why it exists.
Perfect. Thank you, Roger. And then there was a lot of focus in the audit, which has in turn led to House Bill 161, which we'll get to in a second, around the burden of property tax on primary residential property owners versus everybody else. And part of that is what the state did as part of the Our Schools Now compromise several years ago, where the state froze their basic levy, which only applies to school districts, and they froze it for a period of time to increase the amount of money going to public ed. Whether you agree or disagree with that, that just is. That's what the legislature chose to do as a 5-year window that happened to align with the skyrocketing values in property tax. You'll see this finding 2.3 at the bottom. The property tax burden is shifting to residential taxpayers. For the House of Representatives in particular, this has been their top focus. Now, what does that mean in practice? So this is right out of that audit. And they looked at several counties, and they looked at over the last decade what percentage of the property tax burden is borne by residential primary residential property owners versus everybody else. So you can see, for example, in Davis County in 2015, your residential properties that were primary owners were paying 65% of that property tax bill. In 2024, that has jumped to 74%. And there are various reasons why, but it's this data set that has spurred what has turned into House Bill 161. Roger, do you want to add any pieces to that?
Yeah, I'll add this comment, and excuse me for, I find this among the more meaningless pieces of information, but it is also one of the most politically salient pieces of information. So meaningful and politically useful are oftentimes different issues. The simple truth is, I've lived in my home in Davis County for 40 years. There used to be hayfields and a whole bunch of other things that were there. There aren't anymore. They've all been replaced with houses. So your tax base in terms of residential housing is exploding at a rate far in excess of anything else. So by definition, it is a larger share of the base. It's kind of like, okay, so what? But nonetheless, that means it pays a higher proportion than others used to pay before, because the property tax base is a big pie, and it's just what the composition of that pie is. The bigger composition of that pie now is homes. It's not untrue. It doesn't have political standing. It's just sort of like a so what to me.
Perfect. Thank you, Roger. And then the last piece of the audit talks about centrally assessed property value. And now that number has gone down over time and explains why, and then also talks about the residential tax burden. So We give you that as just a quick background to inform some of the thought process behind the bills that are coming forward to you today. We're going to open it up here to Slido in a moment, again, for additional context. This first question is, has your city held a truth and taxation hearing in the last 4 years? Now, for those of you who are newly elected, you may not know, and that's okay. We gave an uncertain option here. But the reason we're asking this question is because as we've had our work group since the last LPC working on different pieces of truth and taxation, what's become interesting is that some cities have gone through this recently, so they've got some salient experience, and other cities haven't gone through it in a long time, and so it's more hypothetical. So that's what we're trying to distinguish with our follow-up questions, is what your city's experience has been. Okay, so I'll leave this open for another 20 seconds or so. And then Carson, I see I've got the bubble for 59 comments in the chat, but I assume you're on top of that. None of that's for us yet. Alexa, great. Okay, I'm going to move on here in just a sec. This is awesome to have so much participation, so thank you everybody in the room and online for being here today. Okay, so if your city has done a truth and taxation hearing recently, have you postponed any of the following expenditures until after the hearing? This gets to one of the questions that we've been trying to address with Representative Karen Peterson, and we're going to talk about her proposed bill here in just a moment. But we've heard from many legislators who are frustrated by the perception or reality that when Cameron City proposes a truth and taxation, proposes a property tax increase and therefore has a truth and taxation hearing in August, that the decision is entirely made in August, so before the August hearing. So when residents come to the hearing in August and the residents are frustrated, the response back from the taxing entity is basically, we've already made the decision, we've already started spending the money, therefore we're proceeding as is. So when we met with our LPC work group last week, we had an interesting discussion of what different cities do. And one city said, well, we actually delay capital expenditures where we were planning to use property tax money until after the hearing. Thought, okay, that's good to know. A couple other cities said we start our compensation in October rather than in July. So what we're trying to get a sense here is what do cities do in this space? And we've tried to give a variety of options. After this question, we'll have an open-ended question as well. So we'll leave this one open for another 30 seconds. And again, if you're new and you're not sure, the unsure is just fine. Okay, I'm going to stay for about 10 more seconds. Okay, I'm moving on. Okay, so this is just an open-ended question to make sure if there's something pressing on your mind about either the question we just asked a second ago, maybe you do something else that wasn't reflected in that Slido question. This is your chance to tell us. Or if you just have other thoughts in the property tax space before we get into the specific bills, this is your chance to tell us that too. These comments are super helpful. We read all of them and we go through and we track them to see what themes there are. So we'll leave this open for a moment before we get into the specific bills. While this is open, are there any questions, either in person or online, about the context of where we are? Well, Roger, that's a good thing that there are no questions.
Either they were terrified or that we've done
Yeah. Councilmember, Mike, the intern behind you, is coming with a microphone. Mike with the mic. It's going to be easy to remember this session.
Hello, everyone. Katina Smith from Leeson. I just want to go back to Roger's point about the maybe not so accurate graphic. And I'm wondering how we as a league can engage our cities and municipalities around more accurate representation of data and information, because these are obviously gotcha moments or opportunities to put something in the paper or on the news to make people freak out about things that really are sometimes about regular business. And so if we as a body can be more focused on how to present that type of information to residents, specifically when you're talking about taxes, not even increases, but just what they're actually going to pay for, what services are being covered by these particular taxes, what services may be cut if we cut those taxes. I think that just not just this year, but moving forward, it would be helpful for us as a body to come together with that type of information and just make sure that we're helping residents understand where the funding is coming from, what it's going to, so that we have appropriate responses to things like that, as opposed to a flippant response or a response that makes people feel like they don't understand. If we could take more concerted efforts around really educating the residents about where their money is going, I think that would really bode well for us as a league, but also for all the cities in the state.
Perfect. Thank you, Councilmember. And well said. And you actually have set up a homework assignment in the property tax space that we're going to get to in a moment on a couple of these bills, so that we have the information we need to share with legislators and educate legislators. And there are a couple other things to reference here. We're going to give a couple more moments. It looks like 17 people are still typing, so we'll leave this open for a second longer. There are a lot of legislators who don't understand how the property tax system works in Utah, and they don't understand that the increase in home values does not immediately equate to more tax revenue for school districts or cities or counties and the like. So we've had a lot of one-on-one conversations with legislators trying to explain to them how the property tax system works. There's also a lot of angst from certain legislators around school districts in particular, and school districts, as we all know, are the majority of the property tax revenue that a taxpayer will pay. So there's a lot of angst with school districts. There's less angst with cities, but of course we get wrapped up into the conversations around tax policy. And there's also some angst with certain counties as well. But generally speaking, there's not a lot of angst with cities, but there's a lot of angst with property tax. And Speaker Schultz, in his comments to the Desert News editorial board a couple of weeks ago about property tax, and this was referenced earlier, basically said, like, we're calling on all governmental entities to tighten their belts, not just the state, but all governmental entities, and using property tax and potential limits on property tax to facilitate that. JJ, your hand is up. Let's go JJ, then Mayor Wilkinson, and then I'm closing this, and we'll move on to the bills.
This is kind of just a vent for a moment. I'll be brief. I don't want to paint with a broad brush, but as we were out with our legislators just a few days ago, it was apparent to me that at least one of them really had no clue about how taxes work.
Only one?
We were talking about sales taxes and property taxes and how property taxes applied to different uses and what actually, you pay tax on personal property. So it's frustrating. Yeah. It's frustrating that they have so much power over something that they think is a problem, and we're just left at their whims.
Well, JJ, let's bring it over to Mayor Mike, over here, Mayor Wilkinson. No, after
I got a really loud voice, so I can probably yell.
No.
I'm going to be brief. We educate our residents through like our newsletter and our website and everything else. And I got to admit, even before I was mayor, I didn't understand property taxes, bullshit, or maybe still don't. But have we looked at getting out to our major news stations to getting this out to where our legislators will then be hearing from the people, hey, I saw this on the news, and really educate people on this, because I think it's pretty critical. That was my thought.
Maybe one quick comment following the mayor. Bear in mind, when you talk to your legislators, there's some that fall into the camp that just hate taxes, they just want to cut spending. Not a lot you can do with those. But some really are trying to learn. And a couple of things I think are you can reinforce. One, the state legislature does not impose a property tax. The state budget does not use a property tax. So in some ways that means this is a freebie for them. They get to yell about something that they have no consequences for the action. But that's something worth pointing out. All decisions that you're going to make or other entities make about taxes and spending are a balancing act. There is no balancing act with their complaints about property tax because they are not making those decisions. You are. So I think that's something that's worth reinforcing. We appreciate your comments, but you are not having to make the decisions on the circumstances that we are having to make.
Yeah, excellent points. And then, Mayor, I'll add, we've chatted with multiple reporters over the last few months on property tax related things, because often the reporters don't understand how the property tax system works either. So we do that on a regular basis where we're sitting down with reporters, not just in property tax, but like last year I spent about an hour with one reporter during the session walking through just how land use works to try to better inform the news coverage around land use and housing by making sure the reporter understood how that process actually works. So yes, we do a lot of that outreach as well. Okay, we do need to get to the bills. So I've got two hands. You're okay?
I really have a comment.
Okay, let's go. Dwayne, are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
Dwayne, Wisconsin City. I'll make this fast. I'm going to disagree a little bit with Roger because I have witnessed in my city that residential property has grown as far as their share of the pie, and it's primarily for two different reasons. One is the freeze on personal property counting towards the new growth that the legislature enacted. The second is that residential property has appraised at a much higher, the growth of appraisal has grown much faster than commercial property.
That's a shift within the group.
Yes, a shift within, so the pie hasn't gotten bigger, just the pieces of the pie have changed. And so the way to fix that would be to put more of the property tax back towards commercial properties, which would essentially give them a tax increase without any of us getting additional money. Homeowners would just see a little bit lower, commercial would see a little bit higher. Do any of these proposals do that?
Yes, the next bill. So not this one, but the next one.
But also let me emphasize, constitutionally the system runs on fair market value. If you were to look 20 years ago, you would have probably seen residential values lower than a lot of those entities. They move. It's not a static issue. So I'm not disagreeing with you, but that shift has happened since 1896 in all directions.
But Dwayne, what you just described is a perfect setup for not this bill, but the next one. So thank you for that. Okay, we're going to walk through both bills that are out right now, but also bills that are not yet out. We've seen the language, but they're just not public yet. And we're going to have some homework assignments over this week for you to get back to us about what these bills would mean for your city in particular, which is why our recommendation today is position pending, because we want to get a little more information before we come to you with a recommendation. So first, SB 97. This is Senator Dan McKay's proposal, which would cap property tax increases annually at 5%. So if this bill were to pass as is, Cameron City, Rogers School District, Justin County, sorry, Justin. All of us would be limited that you could not raise property tax more than 5% in a given year. There's a question already on that. That's not even the hard part of the slide, but let's go ahead.
Does this factor in any inflation or CPI increase, or is this just a flat 5%?
Yep. And then, well, yes, that's it.
And then my second part of my question is, does this also cap anyone providing goods or services to government to cap their annual increases at 5%?
Throw it in.
No. It's also silent on whether or not you go through truth and taxation process as is for that up to 5%. Okay? So it's a little unclear there. There are two other pieces to this bill that really are going to be city by city specific. So when Councilmember Bettina Smith Edmondson was talking about that additional data, this is where we need it from your individual cities. There are two proposed changes to definitions here, and I've spelled them out. Change the definition to locally assessed new growth, and change definition for within project area new growth, which is mainly the tax increment financing tools, both state tools and local tools. So it's changing the definition, and in 2A you'll see it basically says you would get new growth minus this type of change. So what we need to understand from you this week is what sort of impact would this have? And if you have big tax increment projects in your city, you need to really look closely at number 2 and 3 and then get back to us so we understand what this impact would be. With number 1, we're going to ask a Slido question here in a moment to take the temperature of the group, recognizing that LPC's got a different membership today than last year, about that concept of the 5% cap. Okay, before I open up Slido, let Mike with the mic. Yep, right here to the council member, and then Roger.
The only comment that I want to make is this is one of those that gets those legislators elected. Mm-hmm. And so it's one of those that I think as cities we need to take a close look and not fight this or create so much opposition that we create such a negative feel to it to the voters out there. Mm-hmm. Because if I were a legislator, the first thing you go up there and running for something, the first thing you say is, I'm not going to raise taxes or I'll never limit it to more than this percent. So I think we need to be really careful how we approach this bill. And, to come say, oh, I don't agree with this, it's a hard no, I think that would be a big mistake.
No, good points. My quick response is part of the reason we're recommending position pending now that the bill is out is to give us time to build in this additional analysis. The one thing from a local government perspective is we've spent a lot of time over the last few weeks meeting with the Association of Counties and the School Boards Association, because this affects all of us, to try to have a united front of how we're approaching the bill. But also recognizing that if you put a cap on the ability of Cameron City to raise property tax, then essentially the legislative authority that you all have as city council members to make these big decisions of, we really do need to increase property tax by this larger amount for this reason, and having that conversation with the public, you would no longer be able to have that conversation with the public. Okay, just going back.
Just from a very broad brush standpoint, number 2, they've been pushing hard for us to get ADUs and other housing things in here, and now they're talking about eliminating those increases that are happening in the ADUs from being able to be taxed, getting any increase in tax value for that. And I think that's counterproductive, where you're essentially getting all the additional units, but the cities are having to service those but have no revenue to be able to do so.
Yeah, good point. That gets to the less than 100% value, because you're likely not going to double the value.
Yeah.
That's how I hand over here. JJ, okay. Thank you, Bruce. JJ. And I'm going to open up this Slido question while JJ's speaking so we can keep going. And then Alexa, you've got your hand up. JJ.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I was clearly understanding number 2 back on that previous
okay,
slide.
I won't open up the question.
So in other words, if the changes made, if the improvements made did not at least double the value of the property, then it won't count as new growth. Do I understand that correctly?
Yeah, which I think is constitutional. Yeah, I also think that has some constitutional issues along with other things associated with it. But that's never bothered Dan. Okay.
So I'm opening up this Slido question. This Slido question is just focused on number 1. So there are the 3 parts to the bill. The Slido question is focused on number 1. And we want your feedback here, because we're part of the question that we'll have to ask over these next few weeks is just, where do we spend our political capital? Let's go with Seth over on the side.
Thank you. As this question is being asked and everybody's answering, I'll maybe speak a little slowly so that I don't influence too much. But as I think about our budgets in Spanish Fork and how we operate, we don't typically raise property taxes every year, but when we do, it's for a specific thing. Generally, it's going to be more than, I'm going to need more than 5% to do that specific thing, whether it's a new employee type or change in service delivery, whatever that is. I can really see this being something that I'm going to go every year. I'm going to need to go every year for 5%, so that I can save up that increment this year and next year, because I know in 2 or 3 years I'm going to need a big amount. So I think this is a great thought that misses maybe the long-term implication. And so I think little chunks every year would probably be a likely outcome.
Perfect.
Just make an observation. We lived with this for 4 years in the early 80s. It was such a mess, we junked it, and that was what we went to the Truth in Taxation.
Yeah. And this is why we don't let Roger retire, so that he can remind us what happened in the mid-'80s when I was in elementary school. Okay, Alexa.
So we received a lot of comments online, but in the interest of time, I won't read them all off. We have 2 questions. So what is number 2 trying to get at? What was the point for McKay? So the second.
Do you want to address that? In fact, this is the definition of the new growth, less than 100%.
Well, Senator McKay, to his credit, I'll take shots at Dan, but he's been friendly. He dove into the new growth issue fairly extensively a couple of years ago. New growth is a little bit of a name that applies to a whole bunch of stuff. And it got to the being that it had become such a complicated issue that had it moved beyond classic new growth. Now, new growth is supposed to be, if you got brand new development, that should be recognized for being taxed. It's sort of beyond that, to the point now that a number of our communities sit around and wait for the new growth number because it's more important than almost anything else. That's sort of what's driving, I think, Dan, is to say, I'm just going to simplify new growth and say it's only going to apply to this. I think he's been rather arbitrary in what he's picked or not, but I think that's the motivation.
Yeah, and Senator McKay has spent a lot of time in revenue and taxation committees over the last couple of years trying to simplify new growth. Yeah. But even the 5% piece, when we surveyed LPC back in October, we were looking at caps that have gone into effect in other states that have been in the 2 to 3% range. And so he was looking at this 5% number because he was trying to acknowledge that 2 to 3% is often barely your cost of living, and inflationary adjustments, was trying to build in a little extra space. And looking over the last few years, he was trying to calculate if Cameron City went through truth and taxation once every 4 years and it was this amount, if you did a little bit at a time, you could get to that amount. You're just doing it gradually. So there was thoughtfulness as he was building the proposal out. The question is, do we agree with the policy that is being proposed or not? So again, our recommendation as staff is position pending. We're going to send out a follow-up email later today with those homework assignments on 2 and 3, because those get really detailed, and we want your feedback this week so we can be prepared for next week. Okay, Dwayne, you asked about this House Bill 161. It's got a partner, HJR 7. Alexa, was there anything else online? I just realized you said a couple.
You can answer the rest online.
You'll answer the rest online. Great. So House Bill 161 and its companion HJR 7 would change the Constitution. We spent time in October talking about how, as a primary residential property owner, you only pay on 55% of your value of your property, whereas a commercial owner pays on 100%, or a second homeowner pays on 100% of your property. This bill is now out. We've been waiting to see what the number would be, and as of today, the number would change to only taxing a primary residential unit at 40% of the value. And the intent is basically what Dwayne just described. So that's why, Dwayne, you did a nice job setting it up. The idea has been to maintain the existing revenue for Cameron City or Rogers School District or Justin County. So if Cameron City was getting $1 million in property tax, even under this change, Cameron City would still get $1 million in property tax. How that $1 million gets allocated, though, would go down for primary residential owners and would go up for everybody else. So that is the intent, and we've gotten our hands on some statewide analysis of what this would look like in the aggregate. And then you can see our homework assignment for you is, what would the impact of this bill be on your city? Because every city has a slightly different property tax base and therefore a different story to tell. So we want to make sure we understand what those stories are as we go forward. Now, this bill, if it were to pass, would also need the constitutional amendment to pass and be passed by the voters in November. So a lot's going to happen between now and March 6th, and then more will happen after that. Let's go Mark, then Lynn.
so I understand my homework assignment appropriately, are we proposing that this will be a revenue neutral bill for us?
Yes.
So the shift will entirely go to businesses, and that's the math.
Yeah, the shift would go to non-primary residential.
Okay, so does the state realize that they'll just have to raise fees or go out of business, and then turn around and raise higher fees, which is going to do nothing for affordability and all these other aspects? I mean, do they get economics and how that's going to work?
You want an answer?
I guess all kidding notwithstanding. No, I'm serious. Yeah, no, all kidding notwithstanding. The business community is very concerned about this proposal, like extremely concerned about it. And one of the arguments that they have made has been if you do this shift, then you're going to put a business in a position where they're going to have to basically pass along those additional costs to consumers. That message has gotten a mixed response at the Capitol. Some legislators agree with it, some don't. Coming back to local government, they're saying, why does this matter to local government if at the end of the day you're still revenue neutral? The argument from the business community has been exactly what you were just saying, Mark, is that if you make it too difficult for a city in this case to raise property tax, and you squeeze property tax, but the city still has to replace the infrastructure, hire the police officers, fill in the blank, then the city's going to look to other means in order to do so. And so you're moving things around. The overarching response back from legislators has been part of what they're trying to do is reduce the cost to the homeowner and reduce the cost of government at all levels of government. So they're looking at their budgets and they're urging local governments to look at ours.
But they're compounding what should be a progressive tax into a regressive tax structure. So by shifting that burden onto, say, grocery stores, they will only be increasing the regressive nature of the tax as opposed to the progressive nature of it. So it's just flawed on many different levels, and I appreciate your description of that. We'll work on our homework.
Yep, perfect. Thank you, Mark. And then let's go Lynn, and then Dwayne. This side of the room is representing today. Okay, Mike's coming back from the other side. Lex, any questions online?
No, just some comments about what we were discussing about cities with not a robust non-residential tax base.
Right, and that's the sort of info that we'll need this week here. Now that a proposal is out, you can do some analysis and get back to us. So let's go, I think, Lynn, Dwayne, Mike.
Yeah, the question I wanted to raise was, and I don't know whether anyone has had a discussion about the incremental shift this would make from existing homeowners who have equity in the market to renters, which are commercial properties, who don't have any equity in the market, and therefore rents would go up, home ownership would go down, and so it's a net shift in tax burden to renters who already don't have any equity in the market. So.
Yeah, potentially, and we've had conversations with legislators in this space around whether or not, if they're going to change the Constitution anyway, you change the definition around primary residential so that you distinguish between a property that Roger owns and I live in, or a 6-story apartment building, both of which qualify for the primary residential, and distinguish that from, say, the Lynn Pace home where Lynn Pace owns and occupies it and lives there. As of now, there has not been an appetite to include that in these changes too. And in part, the reason, as it was relayed back to us, was the concern that if you did distinguish between the owner-occupied residential and a renter residential, is that you would actually drive up the cost of the rental housing. So be that as it may, just relaying back to you the feedback as we've been in these meetings. So Dwayne was next. Oh, no. Let's go Mike, and then we'll get the mic back.
Mike Winder, Mill Creek. You'd mentioned the phrase revenue neutral, Cam.
Yeah.
I assume that means statewide, not per taxing entity.
So
because per taxing entity, there'd be winners and losers based on how many homes or businesses.
It's not revenue neutral as to individuals. It's revenue neutral as to the entity imposing the tax.
Yes. Yeah.
So it would be revenue neutral on a city-by-city basis.
Sure.
Correct. And school district by school district and county by
But
county.
some people will be paying a lot more money.
Right. Okay. That's my clarifying question.
Yep. That's been the intent so far, Again, it's only January 12th, a lot of moving pieces, but that's been the intent so far. So, let's go Councilmember Desarn, then we'll come over to Dwayne.
Yeah, just to note, this would just make it even more difficult for first home buyers because renters would be dealing with the majority of this increase because of property taxes. So it seems like the state wants to, both at the same time make it easier for first home buyers, but also bring up their costs of property tax or their rent in general.
Yeah, potentially. I think the counter argument that actually some in the home building industry have been making in support of this is that if you're only being taxed on 40% of the value, that'll bring down the property tax bill, making it easier for a first-time home buyer to get into housing. So it's, again, lots of arguments going back and forth. And the good news is every point that you've brought up in this meeting has come up in the conversations at the Capitol the last few weeks. So that's good that we're all on the same page. Let's go Dwayne, and then I'm going to open this up while Dwayne talks.
So I understand Roger's point about how the shifts between commercial versus residential are always ongoing. But there has been a pretty strong shift over the last 10 years where residential has grown and commercial has decreased. Has any of the state analysis that you've seen show whether this puts us back to where we were 10 years ago, even 5 years ago? I mean, we talk a lot about, well, this is going to put a big burden on business, but really businesses have been getting a tax cut over the last 10 years.
Excellent points, Dwayne. I'll take a crack, and then you can. You've done a great job summarizing many of the arguments that legislators are making, because I actually had a legislator on Friday say that basically the same thing, is that over the last few years, businesses have been seeing a smaller percentage or smaller proportion of the tax, and so this is just equalizing that. And I showed the data that came out of the legislative audit, and Davis County really is the biggest one of having that internal shift. Like Salt Lake County is not nearly as pronounced. The state has been trying to gather that data from the tax commission for everybody statewide. So I can't really answer what it looks like 20, 30 years ago. What we do have is what they've published so far of their analysis, which looks at the last 10 years.
Depends on the composition. When you talk about business, business is a pretty big term. I mean, if you're a whole bunch of small stores, that hasn't been a big shift. My caution is generalities in the discussion. The question has been, yes, if you're in a period where certain assets are going up in value, their share of the pie is probably increasing somewhat. Bear in mind, however, the magnitude of what the residential exemption has been. I will tell you, this is one of those, I was at the beginning on it. The idea that this would be a discussion of 55% when this was done in 1982 when it was passed, we would never have believed it. It was set at 25%. We're talking about more than doubling it. I don't think we had a home in the state of Utah that has value was in excess of $1 million then. I hope people realize the 55% exemption on a $4 million home is over $2 million you're taking off the table in terms of being taxed. I mean, at some point, regardless, what's a basic level that everybody ought to get? And then it's just like any other property, you ought to pay taxes. And it's trying to find that equilibrium's obviously been hard. Do we recognize a uniqueness of residential property to a point? Or do we sort of say it basically shouldn't have to pay taxes? I guess the question you get to is, where are we on that scale?
Well said, Roger. And I'm going to pick up on the last line you said of should residential properties still pay taxes? For those of you who maybe haven't seen it, this conversation is happening in states all over the country. Governor DeSantis in Florida, for example, has been pitching no property tax and basically saying once you own your home, you should never pay property tax again. And so I've talked to my counterparts at the Florida League, and they're very concerned about what this is actually going to mean in Florida, of basically saying no more property tax, and that messaging has been trickling around the country. And those of you who are here in November, we had my counterpart from Wyoming here because that was the week of the National League of Cities, and she got up and said, our legislature just cut property tax at all taxing entities by 25% in Wyoming. The state doesn't collect any property tax, so they basically cut the tax on all of us and then told us how to figure it out. And then her parting words, when I asked her if she had any advice for us, her parting words were, don't be like Wyoming. So good start, but that's why we're trying to make sure we understand where everybody's at. Okay. All right. Those two bills are out. You have homework assignments on them. We will send a follow-up email reminding you on those homework assignments. The next couple of property tax bills, 2 of the 3 are not out. 1 is out, but it's part of the overall conversation. So this bill is not yet out, so that's why it's HB TBD from Representative Auxier. And it would create a Colorado-style taxpayer bill of rights around property tax. Really, the biggest piece here is that third bullet point, voter approval required for new property tax increases.
But this is state government too. I mean, this is everything.
Yeah. So the taxpayer bill of rights would be on all governmental entities. The voter approval piece in the property tax space here. So again, the bill's not out yet. We know there's a lot of concern about this bill, not just from us, but from other entities. So we're asking the similar question of what we've asked before here, because then what we're going to do, just sneak peek, is we're going to look at your responses to all of these different questions, then we'll combine them and see, like, relatively speaking, are people more concerned about this one than they are about that one? So even though this one, we're pretty confident we know what the answer is going to be based on past results, we're still asking it from the same group so we can compare. Let's go Nathan and then Margaret.
So in Colorado, they have this issue called the ratcheting effect.
Yeah.
When you have a recession, things come down, you can never get back up, and so you're constantly squeezed. I would have major concerns about this bill. Forget the property tax side, just the whole concept.
Yeah.
Are they mirroring it just off of Tabor out of Colorado, or are they?
Yes, for those of you who haven't worked in Colorado like Nathan has, like Tabor is very concerning for local governments over there. It's very limiting. And the answer is right now we haven't seen a bill. Like we have her version from last year, and then this year that slide I had the screenshot of was from her presentation at Rev and Tax in November, which happened after the last time we met. So that's one slide of many where she was laying out the case for Tabor. We're still trying to get a sense of how much appetite there is in the legislature to go that far. But for purposes of the property tax conversation, we wanted to just ask this particular piece. But Nathan tried to be concerned because it's really handcuffed governmental entities in Colorado. Margaret.
Well, and just to play off of that, in Colorado at least, local governments have more taxing authority than they do in Utah.
And that's
So
a
that
fair
should be
point.
part of this conversation,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Tongue in cheek, I know we're not going to get that, but
Yeah. For those that don't know, Colorado is sort of Colorado and Louisiana are the ultimate home rule states. And so they basically have a number of their cities that basically live by whatever decisions they want to make. I don't know they got excluded entirely from Tabor, but they got a lot of freedom, more freedom than we do here. So in some ways, it's an apples and oranges issue.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And to piggyback on what Margaret said, you could have an item in one city in Colorado that's taxed and another item that's not, because the cities, depending on their situation, can actually create their own tax bases, not just the levies. Let's go, Mike, council member up here, and then I'm going to move on.
Just for myself, when this has happened, what has this done to the sales tax? Because it seems like that's the only way you're going to make it up. So I'm just interested to know what this has done to the sales tax in these areas where they have implemented this.
People in Colorado on top of that.
Nathan, you want to add? Yeah, take it back.
It's coming up.
So if it's like Colorado's bill, your growth is limited to inflation plus population. So if your tax revenues go above that, you have to return those. You are limited. And so it doesn't, you could have a great sales tax year, but you would just be refunding anything beyond that. Now, some of the charter cities got what they called de-Bruced, because Doug Bruce was the individual who put it in, so that the court said you could get a vote and be de-Bruced, which allowed you to keep excess revenues. Colorado is again, dependent on your charter, but when it was just the state, your growth was limited by your population growth and your inflation. And so if any of that decreased, or if you had like a recession, then your growth numbers went down, and that became your new basis to start from. And so they called it the ratchet. You could end up all of a sudden never being able to make up, but still your residents expecting you to provide these services.
Yep, excellent analysis. And that gets to the first 2 points on her presentation. In her presentation, she showed the growth in government spending for all levels of government, from the state down to special districts and everybody in between, as part of the rationale for why
she was
to proceed.
as critical of the state as she was of local governments.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, I have one question.
Alexa, go ahead.
I don't know if you could shed any light about the logistics without a bill. So there was a question about adopting the budget by June 30th, but having to wait until November 5th to see the outcome of the vote. Do you have any context about that?
Yes, I mean, I think there's status quo challenges with that right now. So,
You just need to restate it. Sorry, you'll need to restate the question.
okay. Oh, okay. So, will you say the question again then? As I was already down the answer, and I don't have the I didn't write down the question.
Okay, so the comment was from Matt Brower. He said the logistics of seeking a vote by the public on a property tax increase is significant. Budget has to be adopted by June 30th, but have to wait until November 5th to see the outcome.
Yeah, got it.
It would basically be what we confront now, if something's under a referendum. In effect, it's going to be next year.
Yeah, so the question is, if there was a voter approval requirement for an increase in property tax, how does that work with the actual timing around your budget that you adopt July 1, but you have to wait for voter approval in November? So go ahead, Roger.
Well, if you're subject to a referendum now, that's the same situation. If it wins, you're basically it undoes the property tax increase. You assume if you have to get a vote of the people and you don't get it, you're back to not having the property tax increase. If you get it, it's going to start the next year.
Yeah, and Matt, we've got some of our friends from Ivans in the room today, so thank you for being here. Ivans went through a truth in taxation hearing that the proposed property tax increase was referred, though they didn't collect enough signatures to get it on the ballot. Nevertheless, the county auditor, in reviewing statutory language, did not go forward with the new certified tax rate that Ivans had adopted, and that was subject to referendum. Instead, said, we're not putting that one forward, and even though the signatures were insufficient, forced Ivans to go back to the certified tax rate that the state had set, rather than the new tax rate that Ivans approved in August, which then puts Ivans in budget limbo because they have to use the certified tax number, whereas we always intended that under those circumstances, the new tax rate that the city approved in August would go forward unless voters rejected it in November. In this case, voters did not reject it. I give you that as just an example of something we need to clean up in law this year, period, but gets to this logistical challenge of having the November piece.
Vote requirements on fiscal year entities are a real challenge because you basically have to go to the general election date. You don't have the signature gathering requirement on the requirement, but it's a squeeze job to get that done.
Speaking of referendums, normally we wouldn't bring bills that only address school districts to you, but this one is in the property tax space. There was a lot of frustration from legislators this summer that school districts had proposed property tax increases, went through truth in taxation, and if that had been a city, similar to the Ivans situation I just described, residents could actually start a referendum against the city tax increase. Under state law, there's no mechanism to do the same for school districts. So this is a bill that will be part of the overall property tax conversation. We're staying position pending for now, but want to make sure you are aware of it because it'll be part of the property tax discussions. Okay, last but not least in the property tax space, and then Justin, you were right, we took a lot of time on property tax. This is Representative Karen Peterson's bill, which at least as of 11:30 this morning still was not public. And I'm looking at my staff to make sure it hasn't popped out while I'm up here talking. Okay, let's double check to see if it has popped out. Two pieces to this, and this is what our internal LPC work group has spent a lot of time on over the last few weeks. The problems that Representative Peterson's trying to solve here is the public perception that the entities started their new budget by the August Truth and Taxation hearing, and thus the taxes going forward, as opposed to having a more robust discussion with the public in August. So part one of this bill, when we surveyed this concept, it came back pretty supportive from this group and UCMA, and that was to require an additional public meeting earlier in the process. So late May, early June, we've called it the preliminary property tax increase consideration meeting, okay? A lot of nitty-gritty discussions over like what actually has to be in there. The language that we saw in the draft bill last week really focused on approximate. If there's a better term, we're all ears. The second piece of this is where our internal LPC subgroup was really concerned, and it's around this idea of operating on a tentative operating budget until after the August hearing, and that operating budget would not include the amount of money you were seeking to raise from the property tax. So if in Cameron City's case, we were looking to raise $300,000 of new revenue, we would operate on a budget from July 1 until after the August hearing that does not include that $300,000. That's the concept. There are a lot of logistical challenges that we were trying to work through with her last week. And ultimately, her request to us was, let's get the bill out, let everybody take a look at it, figure out the logistics of it, and then we can circle up early in the session. Again, as of 11:30, the bill wasn't out yet, but these are the two concepts. And so we're position pending, obviously, because the bill's not out. This will be part of the homework as well. When the bill's out, getting feedback on the logistics of how this would work. Any questions about this concept, knowing that it'll be part of your homework? Alexa, anything? Mike?
Can't they hear online the questions from that mic?
That mic, yes. This mic.
Okay, I thought that was.
And there's no scenario here where you just have your meeting in May and not have August at all?
That's where
I'm still trying to get my head around that one.
Yeah, that's where we started, but the other stakeholders were adamant that they did not want the only truth and taxation hearing to be based on approximate information. And we can't get final information until that July notice.
So we think of this as almost like a first read, if you will.
Yes.
Absolutely. Bear in mind, the single most important aspects of truth and taxation to me are the July notice that goes out to every taxpayer in the state. That's the first time you see the whole picture and the first time you see your bill. And that's really the triggering mechanism for an awful lot. The hearing is attached to that. And I think no one was really seriously arguing that either of those could be changed.
Okay. All right. So this is that concept of part two. How do you feel about this proposed requirement to use an operating budget, which is basically all of your revenue except for the amount from your proposed property tax increase, until after your truth and taxation hearings have completed? So this gets to that part two piece. Again, we've done a lot of deep dive with our LPC subgroup. And once this bill is public, we'll circulate it so you can really take it back to City Hall and discuss it further. JJ?
JJ? Oh, please wait for Mike.
Sorry, I've got a devil in my ear here.
Raise your hand.
I don't think my comment here will really change how people respond to this, but as I read the draft language, I was most concerned, concerned maybe isn't the right word. There just needed to be clarification as to whether her use of the term tentative operating budget is the same tentative budget that is in a different part of state code in the budget part of the code, whereas this is the truth and taxation part of the code.
Yes. And
that was pointed out during the discussion.
Okay.
Yeah, and JJ's been in our LPC work group on it, so he's seen a copy of the draft. Only a handful of people have to help us as we've been going back and forth through it, and there are a few of those technical
They kind of
issues.
forgot there's a part over here in Title 10 that's part of this deal.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to leave this on for a few more seconds, and then we will move on from property tax. But this has been super helpful discussion and questions and feedback. I'm going to kind of close where Councilmember Smith Edmondson started, which is helping legislators understand what property tax actually means, how it works, and the services and infrastructure you provide. A lot of the angst is being driven by frustration with school districts. And school districts have been in this unique spot that we mentioned in the audit, where they had this 5-year state levy that was floated, and so they were seeing additional revenue for that 5-year period of time. That does not apply to cities. Okay? So the truth in taxation process has just worked the same for us over that same 5-year period of time. Yes, we've had dozens of cities and towns in the last few years who've increased property tax, and they followed the process. They've had discussions with their public, and even the cities that got tripped up with some of the ambiguities in this past summer didn't get pushback from their residents. They got tripped up on the logistics. So that's, we keep bringing that up in all of our meetings, that there's a bigger picture with school districts that doesn't apply to us, and we're concerned about the consequences on us.
Those Slidos after tough. So jump ahead.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Tough
okay.
too, yeah. And then go back to tough.
Okay, so yeah, good call, Justin. Okay, so the league board meets next week, so we don't have a formal LPC next week because of Local Officials Day, and it's a 4-day week. We have the league board meeting that will be on Wednesday. So all of these Slido results, we will present to the board, okay? So we have 2 last ones here in the property tax space. Number 1, this is where we're asking you, do you agree with this statement? Defending the authority of cities to increase property taxes at their discretion, so no voter approval, no 5% cap, should be a high priority for ULCT. Do you agree, disagree, somewhere in between? Because this will be helpful as we go back to the board, talk about our political capital. This is the first question, and then the second question is everybody, right? Okay.
Yep. And then if you want to talk.
Yeah.
I want to make one comment about the magnitude of when we talk about entities increasing taxes. We've got 257 cities now. We've got 29 counties. We've got 41 school districts. That's 327 entities. We also have over 400, maybe 500 special districts. That means the universe of entities that have the authority to deal with property taxes, many of those are very small. It's approaching 900 entities. If you have 10% a year that elect to go through truth in taxation, you will have 90 some odd entities who will choose that process. That's not a criticism. That's just an order of magnitude. You get questions sometimes from legislators, does everybody have to increase taxes every year? No, but if 90 of them, that's only 10%. And bear in mind, in the case of property tax, some of that is just catching up with inflation. But he wanted you to be aware of the magnitude of the issue, and that we are sort of riding along with the wave of a lot of other entities that are here. And frankly, we're the only ones really doing a really good job of articulating the issue.
Perfect segue to this other question. Do you agree or disagree with this statement, defending the authority of all property taxing entities to increase property taxes at their discretion should be a high priority for the league? So this is getting to Roger's point that we as cities are about 1/3 of all taxing entities. So are we all in this together, or is the city a higher priority than others? Recognizing that a lot of your cities rely on special districts and other entities to provide infrastructure and services for your community. So this is, again, just trying to take
a lot of your cities have multiple rates.
Yep, and taking the temperature of the group here so we can finalize the plan forward with the board next week. So we'll leave this open for about 20 more seconds, and then I'm going to quickly hit tough. And then the good news is housing land use, the bills we were hoping to be able to present today aren't out yet. So that'll be a next week problem. Okay, I'll leave this open for 10 more seconds. This has been great feedback via Slido, great discussion. So thank you everybody for your time and attention here. Nothing says Happy New Year like talking property tax, right? Okay, speaking of Representative Peterson, year 3 with the transportation utility fee bill. We have a draft. We're meeting with the stakeholders this Thursday. So if you want to see the draft, let me know. It is protected. I have permission to share it with a few key folks. So I'll be following up with a few people who've been involved in our work group over the last couple of years. We're meeting this Thursday. The 2 big differences from last year relate to methodology and appeals. And in the methodology, we would actually put in statute, these methodology needs to look at trip counts or traffic impacts. The second piece of the methodology is you cannot use property value or ownership. This is actually getting to property tax because we do have some cities that base their TUF on property value, and so it starts to smell like a property tax because it's using the property tax inputs as opposed to a user fee, which should be based on the use. So we were explicit in this draft of what you can use for methodology and what you cannot use for methodology, to have that distinction between property tax and user fee. And then letter C is, in your study, you exclude the lowest day of the week in the study. Okay? And then the second piece is codifying a requirement to have an appeal process, which the cities that have TUFs right now, some do, some don't. But we think this is a best practice anyway, so codify it if your city proceeds with a TUF. Those are the big changes from last year. The bill will still include the public safety fee language. It will still include broadband fee language, both of those as general fees. So you will see that language is unchanged from past years. Then you have this. And when I say past years, that language did change some last year. So it's basically last year's bill plus these provisions. Okay? So if you want to see the draft, reach out to me because we're meeting with the stakeholders on Thursday. Okay. Wooey. Wooey. I'm glad I'm done. Thank you, Roger.
Oh, who's going to take it? You just click it over. This is going to take 10 seconds.
Okay.
And then you're not
I'm going to drink.
Yeah, you can get a drink. This slide just exists so Cam can get a drink. If you've not seen the new WUI maps, they are out now. Scan that QR code, it will take you there. If you have questions about the layers that you need to see, you can grab Carson or I, and we can walk you through how to get to the correct layers. But really, this is just here to let you know they're out there. We put this out in Friday Facts, so just making you aware if you have not seen the updated WUI maps, those are out. That was your whole. You get a drink, Cam?
Yeah.
All right, that was your break.
That was my break. And I appreciate that people are listening. So when I said contact me, they are contacting me. So I appreciate that. Thank you. About tough bill. Okay. We'll spend a lot more time in future LPCs, I assure you, on housing land use stuff. Here's what you need to know for today. House Bill 68 is the reorganization of all the housing programs. We presented this concept to you in November. The bill just wasn't out yet. Now it's out. Our recommendation is to support it. We met this morning with Steve Waldrop and Representative Cal Roberts. There are a couple of things in here that we have some questions about, and so they want to have some follow-up conversations and look at some potential amendments. So that's why it's support with the acknowledgement. There'll be some amendments. They're already working on a substitute. The first primary piece here is the agency restructuring of housing programs. It ends the CHA. The second piece is about the use of publicly owned land for housing. I'm going to come back to that one in here in a second, because this is really more about this is more about just the process for granting, selling, or leasing those properties. So again, our recommendation is to support with amendments and working on some of those amendments now. Okay, next, House Bill 184. We brought this to our LPC advisory group on housing on Friday. They were overwhelmingly concerned about it. This is Representative Ward's latest bill that would create a new term called preferred land use regulation. And the idea here is that there would be 3 different types of preferred land uses in state law. Defined starter home, lots at 5,400 square feet, and all types of ADUs. So in Cameron City, if Roger wanted to build a detached ADU, under state law it would be a preferred land use regulation. So if Roger's proposal, if his application meets that definition of preferred land use regulation, then it's preferred. So the default is that it's approved. Then the city would have 30 days to officially approve it or to deny it. And if the city didn't act, it would automatically be approved. So it's the first time we've ever seen this sort of terminology around preferred land use regulation. In order to deny, the Planning Commission or City Council must make findings on the record that explains why they are denying the preferred land use. So when we surveyed this at our LPC advisory group on Friday, 74% were very or somewhat concerned. So based on the feedback we had in that meeting, and we've talked about it in that group a couple of times prior, our recommendation is to oppose as drafted. Are there And I say as drafted because I know he's been working on some additional modifications, so there may be another version of it soon. Are there questions about either the substance of the bill as is or the staff recommendation to oppose for today?
Can you go back to the previous slide just for a second? I just need to get a picture of it.
Yep, and when we send our homework email later today, we'll have links to the slides, so you can have those. Alexa, any questions online? Is there anybody who wants to suggest changing the staff recommendation? Well, I'm actually seeing people shake their heads no. Okay, good, you're still paying attention at 1:40, that's great. Okay. Alexa, any questions online?
Yeah, just one, and you'll need to repeat this. The question was, is this just for rezones?
Yeah, the question is this for a reason. No, this would be under any sort of circumstance. So it's basically a state default rezone option for a property owner that then the city would have to say no and explain why you're saying no. So from our perspective, our analysis is this still undermines your legislative authority as cities because it's creating this preferred option. And what happens the first time the Cameron City says no to this state preferred option? What happens if that's litigated? What's the standard of review? And then what does it mean at the Capitol? Okay. I was about to get to my favorite slide here, which has all these words. Yes, go ahead,
Just
Summer.
one question about an internal, so the zoning, so you're saying a new build would qualify for the preferred land use if it also included an internal ADU?
Yes, if it's in an area that doesn't already allow for internal ADUs. So in South Ogden, if you allow internal ADUs in 75% of your city over here, but in this portion of the city you haven't for X, Y, and Z reasons, if an individual said, well, I'm going to build a house with an IADU in this area, and then your city council would proactively have to say no within 30 days and explain why. Okay. Then this bill is still HB TBD. This is the bill that we've actually brought a lot of these concepts to the League Board and to the LPC, and our advisory group has discussed a lot of them, and there's still, a lot of them are still under, language is still going back and forth. And it ranges from technical cleanups to language around planning commissions, the detached ADU language that we've talked about in this meeting previously, deleting the annexation policy plan requirement, clarifying the incorporation process, defining what reasonable diligence looks like in land use applications, and state law around public infrastructure standards. And I want to emphasize all of our survey results in every meeting we've done all year long in the public infrastructure standard space has come back with significant concern. Doesn't matter what the meeting is, who's in the meeting, staff, electeds, there's been every idea that has come forward in that space has been met with concern. All these other pieces, as we've brought ideas back and forth, has been met with like, yeah, we could work with that, or yeah, that makes some sense. And so you'll see a lot of still negotiating here because of the different, different languages going back and forth. So this is a bill that once Ledge Research is done with it, we'll bring back to you in the next few weeks. But wanted just to give an update. Anything I missed, Jared, on that one?
I don't think it'll be 7,000 lines.
No, it will not be 7,000 lines like last year's bill. It will definitely not. But I will note that there are other bills that are coming. This is reflective of a conversation just had now 2 hours ago, where I wrapped it up with Representative Cal Roberts. Still HB TBD. Again, lots of bills are going to be dropping over the next week or two. And this is something we've talked about at LPC and at the League Board for the last few years. And this is around infrastructure financing partnership. And the idea here is that the state would provide a funding stream for regional infrastructure that has a nexus to affordable home ownership opportunities. So there's been a lot of back and forth here. The bill's still not ready, but Representative Roberts told me this morning, please share it. He would love to see League support for this bill. So he's running House Bill 68. He's going to run this bill. And then he's also going to run a bill that gets into a little more of the details around the use of state-owned land and how that state-owned land can be turned into affordable owner-occupied housing in partnership with the local land use authority. So that bill is also not not yet ready, but I hope in the next few days we'll be able to put some eyes on these bills to bring them back to you in the next few days. And Representative Roberts is hopeful that this package of bills, these three plus the Representative Cofer bill, would be the package around housing and land use. There are other bills out there that we've received that undermine local government, either through preemption or changing the standard of review or dictating what cities can and can't do. So those bills are going to be there. Bill sponsors have the right to bring whatever bills they see fit. We're hoping that we say no to those bills, and then we can get to yes on this package, which could make a really positive difference if there's significant dollars available for infrastructure. Okay? So, last homework assignment. This will all be part of the follow-up email. We've asked this in the past. Carson asked this in our summer survey, so we'll be following up accordingly. But system improvements. Where do you have system improvements in your area for regional infrastructure that if there was funding made available, that in turn could unlock additional housing units? Related to this, we are working on a handout for Local Officials Day next week that does a couple of things. One, it highlights some of the partnerships that local governments have been doing with willing builders. So I see South Jordan here, Taylorsville was in the back, like some of the projects that South Jordan and Taylorsville and Provo and other communities, Washington City, have done, where you've had a willing builder said, I'm willing to do these things to ensure affordability and ownership. And the city said, okay, well, we're willing to do these things. Sometimes that's density, sometimes it's other things. And kind of working together have gotten to these projects. So we're working on a handout for legislators that spells out and spotlights some of those projects and also gives basically a progress report on all the work cities have done on station area plans and on centers and on inspections and everything else. So it becomes basically this one-stop shop handout for legislators of what's been going on in that space. So we're putting the finishing touches on that handout this week, and that handout can't tell every story. So it may say South Jordan, but then I urge Sandy and Kaysville and Murray and Midway and others, fill in the gaps with your details of what your communities are doing. Okay. Justin, here's your rapid fire, and then we'll ratify the recommendations. Thank you, everybody, for your time and attention today. And the next time we see you, will be at Local Officials Day next Wednesday. Please bring your youth councils. It's my favorite day of the year. And then things turn south the next day. But thank you for all your time today. And Justin, I'll turn to you.
It's weird. My favorite day is about 7.5 weeks later. All right, this is really just an example. When we get to the end of LPC, we don't have time to talk about every bill that is out there, but we're going to try to let you know bills that we have suggested changes to position on. They may just be on the bill tracker. So here's a few things that we've talked about quickly. Municipal services fee and political subdivisions lien amendments. This is one we supported last year, sort of died on the board. So coming back again, Mill Creek. It's there. Supporting the political signs amendment from Jordan Tusher. We've talked about this one over the interim. He changed some things in the bill, which got us to an opposition place to a place of neutral. Government immunity amendments. This is the Armenta decision case that we talked about that reestablishes the way we believe it should be working for government immunity for first responders. County classification modifications, position pending. We're waiting to see where this one goes to see if we care about it. And then kratom revisions, we're monitoring that one to see if we care about that one either. But this is something we try to do at the end of the LPC, is let you know things that we've talked about previously that maybe, as you can see, we had a lot to talk about, we didn't have a chance to get to, but want to let you know where some changes of positions are. So with that, Mayor Kate, we're going to need two final motions. One to ratify the bill tracker, and then two to adjourn this. And yes, that's what I'm calling you now. All the same.
The back row has its benefits, but not when we have to come all the way from the back. Okay, so we need a motion to ratify the tracker. Do we have a motion to ratify the positions? I heard for who? Dawn. There we go. Thank you. And a second? Thank you, Mayor Zoltansky. All in favor of ratifying the tracker, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? You have a ratified tracker. Beautiful. Enjoy. Exciting. And then next motion is motion to adjourn, and then we will see you all at Local Officials Day. Don't all jump at the chance to adjourn. Thank you, Don. Dan, all right. Motion to adjourn, please say aye. Any opposed? Looks like y'all want to leave.